2 grade, don't forget it's due tonight. Some of you have turned it in already, but the majority of you have not, I believe. So just make sure you finish that today. That's an individual assignment and will count towards your, it will count instead of your quiz 2 grade. And it's just a few questions looking up how to find the pharmacy laws on the website that was posted in the one of the lectures before. We also will have a medication safety exercise. This is like just an activity. They're broken up into groups, saying like group 1 members answer this question, group 2 members answer this question, but it is an individual assignment, so you don't have to be in your groups. It's just assigning who is going to answer what questions. But it's just 2 or 3 questions depending on whatever group you're in. It's not a lot. After the quiz, we can work on it in class, but it's not due till Wednesday, so you guys have time to finish that. Next class on Wednesday, Dr. Vitale will be lecturing. So that's actually the last lecture of the class. The rest is just working on business plan things. So he's going to be the next lecture, 4:10. Please be on time. Okay, he will call you out. He's not, shy to do that. And I encourage you guys to come on time, not just to his class, to all the classes, including all of our classes. So please be in the habit of getting here on time. I've been like very lenient with that, but really going forward, you guys really need to work on that employee professionalism. A lot of professors will not tolerate behavior. Okay, then so that's Wednesday. Then the following Monday is going to be a business plan working day. So you guys will be in your groups. That's the last chance you have to work on it together, because the next day is going to be the due date for your report and your presentation for all groups. So you need to be working on that. Hopefully it shouldn't be too much, because we have done all the parts up until this point. So the report will be essentially just putting that together and putting like a cover page and an executive summary. And I'll write that for you guys. And then the presentation will be just a few slides going over that, and you'll be presenting to the class. So one note, the financial plans, I did upload them to the person who submitted them on Brightspace just late last night, so you probably haven't been able to look at that yet. So most, if not all, groups did not do the equations like we had talked about in class. So I'm gonna just give you guys the points for participation, because the rest of it was pretty good for most of the groups. But you need to go back and revisit those. So we'll do that in class on Monday too, so everyone's on the same page. So I apologize if it was very confusing with what I explained to you guys. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about how to do the 2 different equations, and what exactly we're looking for this. And then so we can do that. You do not need to resubmit it like we have been doing for the other assignments. You'll just get the full points. However, for the final report, they do need to be complete and accurate, okay? So that's why you do need to revisit it on your own. You just don't need to submit it as its own separate assignment again. Does that make sense? Okay. And then SWOT analysis are up. And then formulary, I will get those out to you guys tonight as well. And we'll talk about that. That doesn't necessarily need to be included in the business plan, not that big chart that you guys need, so that's okay. But I would just mention what drugs you have on formularies, something like that. But typically you don't need to put that into a business plan. So that's fine, don't stress about that one. And then, yeah, like the last thing I said, business plan and the presentation will be due on 4/16, which is a Tuesday for all groups. So 4/15 Monday, we'll work on it in class. Tuesday, everyone will need to turn it in. And then that Wednesday is for its presentations. So there's 6 groups. It'll be the first 3 presenting on the first day. Second day will be the remaining 3 groups. But everyone's stuff will be due the same day, so that it's fair for everyone. What questions do you have about this? Do you understand me? Any questions on this stuff? Okay. For med safety, what questions do you have about that? Nothing? You haven't liked it? Alright, everyone took pictures and some of this. Oh, I'm gonna put this down. Sorry guys, I hope you all had a nice weekend. I hope you had a relaxing time. Sorry we didn't go into all that.
You put it up real quick, I got to take a picture.
Safety that the 3-skid model as
assume that all errors originate in the same level, and you could have like errors that could originate at lower levels, but the model was not showing that.
Yeah, no, so the model is, and so the model is not specific to like pharmacy or med errors in general, it's like healthcare system errors, it's more general. But it's true, it can happen at any time. So Swiss cheese model just means that there are like multiple things going on, different barriers in place, regardless of what level it's at. There are multiple barriers in place to prevent an error from becoming an event or reaching the patient. So those are the slices, and then the holes are like inconsistencies or things that could go wrong with each of those barriers. When I explained it, it was more for us to figure out like how that works specifically with med errors, to kind of look at that. But and that's kind of how you think about the different barriers. Like it could be you have one barrier in ordering, one barrier in transcribing, things like that. But it doesn't have to necessarily be each step in the dispensing process. Does that make sense? But yeah, essentially, no matter what barrier you're talking about, no matter what like safety precautions you have in place, if all the holes or all the problems that could go wrong align, that's when an error actually reaches the patient. Okay. We don't have a lecture, this is the same thing we did. But for the quiz, make sure you know this. Right, just going into this again, adverse drug events is the more general term. Basically any negative or unwanted consequence that could happen as a result of getting a drug. An adverse drug reaction is a type of adverse drug event. And that happens irregardless of how you're giving the medication. So you gave the medication correctly at the right dose, frequency, all that stuff to the patient, and still something unwanted happened. So think of that as typically as side effects. So not necessarily something wrong in the way that you administered it, but something just negative that happens because of the drug, right? So adverse drug reactions are type of events, and adverse drug reactions happen with appropriate administration. Medication errors are preventable, right? So that's what the main thing is. The fact that they are preventable, that's why this whole area of med safety exists, because there are ways for us to prevent, and so that's really where the study of it comes from. So preventable events that might lead to inappropriate medication use or potentially patient harm, and that's what we're most worried about, that it might harm the patient. And then the sentinel event is any type of event that we've talked about here, but it's like very serious in that it causes death or potentially serious death. Okay? Any questions on those? All right. Does anyone remember the three factors that could lead to errors in a hospital system? So it was like the Venn diagram.
System.
Not that. That's
That's gonna be
What'd you say?
Failure of individual.
individual systems. That's the next thing. Yeah. And then
Error in dispensing?
so that stuff is like more general. So the ordering, dispensing, all that is talking about like specifically with medications. And when we're talking about pharmacy. So just in general though, like in healthcare, where do errors come from? So that's where we talked about failures in systems, failures in individuals.
High-risk procedures?
And high-risk procedures, right. So that's this slide here, very good. So this is just in general errors happening, which could include medication errors, but it's, usually a cause of one, if not all three of these factors coming into play. So these are the factors influencing errors in general, healthcare errors. Now, what were the 5 steps of the medication use process? Some of this that you guys talked about already. Not the dose. So this is like the actual process of getting a medication to a patient. So first you have to order or prescribe it,
Transcribe?
then transcribe it, so write it into your system, however, so that you can use it. Dispense,
Administer?
administer,
Monitor.
and then monitor. And where do the majority of medication errors come from? In which step in that 5-step process?
Prescribe.
Ordering and prescribing, yeah. And then don't forget, so we're gonna this stuff, we'll go into this. So yeah, these are the 5 steps. The majority of the errors occurring in the ordering and prescribing step, the And so some of the errors that could happen there are the ones that we included here, so just not selecting the right dose or dosage form, using unapproved abbreviations, right? So using U instead of writing out units, putting QD instead of every day, things like that. So things that could lead to confusion, PRN orders without having an indication. So what am I giving this as needed for? Giving something, prescribing something that I should have an allergy to, writing an illegible prescription where a pharmacist cannot actually read it, and then they could lead to errors. Putting range orders, meaning you can give anywhere from this dose to that dose, 500 to 1,000. But when do you give 500? When do you give 1,000? It can be confusing. Verbal orders, we said, is a huge source of errors, just because of the way they're passed on between people. And then our lookalike, soundalike medication. So who remembers what a lookalike, soundalike medication was? The last step.
Bupropion, Buspirone?
Yeah, so exactly, medications that literally look alike, their names look alike and sound alike. So, Buprone and Buspirone, it's here somewhere. But yeah, here. So, right, so there's names that look very familiar. And so one of the ways that we can overcome that is by using this tall man lettering. So capitalizing some of the letters excuse me, within the word to try to differentiate and to emphasize the difference between them, okay? So remember that the LASA medications, lookalike soundalike medications, their names look very similar. So it could lead to errors because people could grab the wrong medication off the shelf because their names look so similar. So you want to try to, separate those medications as much as possible, put alerts, make different color coding systems, use tall man lettering, things like that, to try to draw your attention to the fact that these two medications look alike, but they are not the same medication. And remember that it applies to both generic and brand names. So it could be generic name of one medication looks similar to a brand name of another, or two brand names look alike, two generic names look alike. So it doesn't discriminate. Elasta can be any name that looks similar, and tall man lettering is something we use to get over that. What else? So we said ordering and prescribing is where the majority of medication errors come from, but keep in mind that dispensing, so this is the fact where you're actually getting the medication and giving it to the patient or giving it to the nurse to give to the patient. That one, even though that part only accounts for 11%, the majority of those errors will reach the patient. So it's important to know that, had you got the wrong medication from the shelf or filled the wrong prescription, at that point there are less barriers in place. So a lot of times things that go wrong in the dispensing phase, the majority of them will reach the patient. So you have to be very careful with that.
Ordering and prescribing is higher than transcribing as well?
Correct, yeah. So, because if you think about it, that's the first step, right? Ordering and prescribing. So that's where, all of these things can go wrong. Whereas transcribing is, when, for example, if you get a written prescription in a community pharmacy, a doctor gives you a prescription. Transcribing is the part where you're taking that written prescription and typing it into your computer. So yes, you could make a mistake, but it's typically only one person involved, and you have one script in front of you, and it's more like an error in typing or something. So there's less room for error, or less ways that an error could happen in that phase. Whereas if you think about the ordering phase, with all these things, they could just order the wrong medication in general. What else? All right, who's gonna describe the Swiss cheese model of human error? Yes.
Basically, a model used to demonstrate the possibility of an medication error.
Correct. So, can you explain, what the cheese means? Do you know what that part means?
Those are safety checks.
Yeah, so each slice of cheese exactly is like a safety check or a barrier that's put in place to potentially prevent an error from occurring. But the holes are like lapses in that, so they're, like ways that an error could happen. And so, if all the holes line up, and basically it's like this, then there's like a problem, a failure of this system, a failure of this system, a failure of this system, or a failure of each step or person, or whatever the barrier or safety precaution is. If there's a failure in all of them and all the holes line up, that's when your error actually gets to the patient and turns into an event, right? Whereas, you know, if there's an error and maybe, in this case, we'll say that each slice is one of the steps in the medication dispensing process. If we say that, you know, someone ordered it incorrectly, so there's an error that gets to the ordering piece, but the pharmacist catches it on transcribing, you know, it only gets through one hole, but at this point, it's sweet. So that's what that means. But if the order is written incorrectly, ordered incorrectly, transcribed incorrectly, and then when they dispense it, they still dispense it correctly, they don't realize at that point that still the dose is inappropriate or whatever, you know, that's how it goes through all the phases and gets to the patient. Does that make sense? Any questions?
I have a question, but it's on a different slide.
Sure, what slide is it?
So the resume medication, is that like when you go from inpatient to outpatient?
This one, resume at home medication?
Yeah.
So it could be at any step. It could be, somebody coming into the hospital and the doctor is saying, put them on all their home medications without necessarily talking about what it is that they were on at home before coming into the hospital. It could also be when they're leaving the hospital and then the doctor is writing, resume all their home medications. So it could be at any point.
So that's something that they tend to do and
They could.
likely from that mistake.
Correct, it could be. So basically if they come in for like a COPD exacerbation, so something's wrong with their breathing, we're gonna give them some antibiotics or something like that to take care of that. But everything else, they have blood pressure at home, they have allergies, they have this, they have that, all of that is like controlled. So they might say, resume all their other home medications, put them back on everything. But if somewhere in the records, you know, a medication is documented incorrectly, or the patient, you ask the patient, what are you taking at home, and they say something wrong to you, you know, those are all potential areas where errors could occur. Yeah, so basically what you should do instead of resume all home medications is write an order for each home medication, like how you want that to be resumed, the exact order for it. Okay. Does anyone remember what an automated dispensing cabinet is, such as Pyxis or Omnicell? What it is and like what phase in the medication use process it's normally incorporated into?
Dispensing and
Dispensing, yep. So that's something like this machine right here. So just like the name says, automated dispensing cabinet, right? It's in dispensing. So basically, instead of in a normal pharmacy where a pharmacist would dispense or get the medication from the shelf and dispense it to the patient, these medications, these cabinets or these machines already have medications loaded into them. So then when the nurse, they're in the hospital system, when the nurse needs a medication, they can go into it, say that I need Tylenol for Sally in bed 5, and they will open up the pocket that has specifically Tylenol. So that is the dispensing portion. There's no pharmacist involved in dispensing it to the nurse, but instead there's a specific cabinet that's already coded for one medication that will automatically open. So it's less hands in the pot, if you would, if you say, so that way that helps to kind of minimize errors because everything is kind of computerized. Very good. Alright, so in terms of administering, okay, so we obviously know that if you give the wrong medication, or the wrong dose, or the wrong route, or the wrong frequency to a patient, that is a med error, right? Because it's not what you're supposed to give them, or not what they were ordered. But what about if you just don't administer a medication to them that was ordered? Is that considered a medication error?
Yes.
Yes. So if you physically administer the wrong thing, that is an error, but also if you do not administer something that the patient is intended to get, that is also an error. Right, so if the patient has very high blood pressure, we're supposed to give a medication to lower their blood pressure and we do not give it, and then the patient ends up getting a stroke at the end or something, that is something, a preventable medication error that we could have prevented if we had given the drug as ordered. Okay? So remember that. Not giving something can potentially be a medication error as well. Alright. What else? So then we talked about with monitoring. So monitoring, we don't have much data about, how many medication errors really occur here because this is usually out in the real world where the patient leaves. But one of the ways that we kind of try to recognize if errors happen is through our 30-day hospital readmission rates, right? So this is a quality metric that is very important to both hospitals and CMS being the provider for Medicaid and Medicare. So all of this is taken into account because if patients are returning to the hospital within 30 days, that means there's something wrong. They're not taking their medication as needed. We didn't treat them in the hospital correctly. They're not taking care of themselves like we counseled them to. So they should not be coming to the hospital so quickly, right? If they just got admitted to the hospital. So if patients are returning to the hospital within these 30 days after they just got discharged, that usually is an indicator that something bad is happening or something wrong might have occurred. So that's why we try to have low 30-day readmission rates. So we have a low number of patients that actually return. We would like to have no patients return within 30 days, but that's a way to catch if something maybe had gone wrong with what we had given them in the hospital or with something that happened outside of the hospital. So it's 30 days, not 60, not 90, not 120, it's 30, okay? Alright, so now when you're actually working as a pharmacist, these are the 5 rights of a prescription. This is for you to take into account, for doctor to take into account, nurse, everything. You should be tricking all of these 5 things when receiving an order, when dispensing, when administering, whatever, any process within the med use process. You want to make sure you have the right patient because you could have everything right about the dose and the medication, but if you give it to the wrong person who it's not intended for, it could lead to negative consequences. So you want to make sure you're giving it to the right person, you're giving them the right medication, the right dose, the right time frequency. If it's BID, you give it to them twice a day. If it's with food, you give it with food and not, at nighttime or something. And then the right route, PO, IV, IM, whatever that may be. So 5 rights of a prescription: patient, medication, dose, time frequency, and route. And this should be followed by basically anyone who's involved with getting a medication to a patient. And then who remembers the organization that we talked about at the very end, which is focused on medication safety?
ISMP.
ISMP, very good. Institute for Safe Medication Practices. So remember that this is the only organization that we really talked about. Sure, it's a priority of all organizations that we are delivering medication safely to our patients, but ISMP is the one that's one of the ones that are really leading the way on that. That was a whole lecture. What other questions do we have? What?
You want the question?
No, what questions do you have
Oh, okay.
before the quiz? Because we have a quiz. So, what questions? Anything unclear?
I wasn't, it was, how would I say, like it caught my attention, that ordering, we didn't give a percentage for that. Why?
I think I just didn't put it on the slide, but it's anywhere from 30 to, it's anywhere from like 40 to 60. Think about 50%.
Something.
Yeah, so it depends on where you're looking, and some of them have